Good morning, everyone.
Hi, hello.
Glad you joined us on this Friday morning for our next breakfast session. So today we are going to talk about how do you produce your e-learning content internally in an effective way.
And specifically, we'll talk about your team. So obviously, there is a number of things that are involved in content production, and we could talk about that for hours, and we will trust us. But today we will focus on the team. Anyhow, great. All right. So let me just kick us off. If you can turn to my presentation, let me kick us off actually with something that I've prepared here in the form of a video. So this is the Formula pit stop from 1950. So 70 years ago, Formula One, the car racing, for those who don't know, this is what it looked like 70 years ago. Well, this one actually is from INTEA.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Newmore himself changes the tires.
I like how the
Only
guys
4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch.
Okay, that's tire number 1. It's tire number 2.
The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
All right, just 67 seconds. Now, if you notice, there are 4 people working on that car. That was a regulation that, in that particular race, just 4 people per car doing the pit stop. Now, what would you do to make this pit stop faster? So the question is there a trick to making this faster, going from 67 seconds to, let's say, maybe half a minute at least?
Yeah, but seriously, the trick is actually quite a simple one, and you've seen that trick, I think, many times. So split tasks.
Yeah. No, well, wait a second. So the trick is like a lot of people, especially in face-to-face things, will say. A lot of people will say that the trick is to add more people, right? So if you don't have 4 people and one guy changing all the tires, in this case, today you can actually have almost unlimited number of people there. So you can have 3 people working on a tire. Look at that. All right, so that was about 2 seconds, right? Why? Because they have about 16 people working on this. A lot of people will say that, bigger teams will work better. We just need more people to, let's say, produce more content, build it faster, and so on. That's not always the case. And just very quickly, I will show you this stop, which took 57 seconds, like 70 years ago. Why? Because the guys actually took the wrong tires, and then they broke off the spoiler and they tried to fit a new one. It didn't fit, and then they like it all went really south. You can see how the guy who is responsible for tires, trying to choose one, runs back and forth. The guy is really pissed. So that took like 57 seconds. It was like they really did screw up. So I think the moral that I'm trying to convey here is that bigger teams don't solve problems. Actually, they can bring more problems. So if you are building a team, if you are hiring new people, if you are expanding, then that brings problems more often than not. I think we at INTEA have had our share of trouble with that. We had very rapid growth phases, and we wanted to share what helped us and how we work today, and what we think is useful in that sense, right? So one of the most useful things when we talk about speed and quality is the Six Sigma approach. We will not give you here the full black belt of Six Sigmas here. I'm pretty sure a lot of you can find a course that involves lean production somewhere on your LMS. I know we've built a couple of those, but the idea is that everything you do has a certain deviation, right? So sometimes it's right on point at the center, everything is right and correct. Sometimes it will take a little bit longer than you expected, or it will probably work worse than you expected, and so on. And the idea of Six Sigma is that 99.99% of everything you produce fits within the Six Sigma deviation. That means like very much consistent quality. That was invented by the Japanese when they needed to industrialize after the World War II, and that was the approach that was popularized in 1980s by Toyota, and then everyone, I think, uses this philosophy. So here are a couple of outtakes from that approach that are very much relevant to producing e-learning and also to running e-learning teams. And when I started reading about that a few years back, I found out how amazingly, without knowing that, we have built our company very much according to this. So to really boil it down to three key things, the lean approach involves processes and methodology. It's about tools and techniques that you use to produce quality, and also it's about mindset and culture, right? And in very simple terms, that means what we do, and that means how we do it, and that also means why we do it this certain way. And as always, the why is the most important part, and we always start with why, right? You can't have effective production or effective team without having a joint understanding, a joint mindset. So these three key things are kind of the key to successful process. With your either the smaller team of 2-3 people, or also the extended team for every project, which involves more people. Could be the outside vendors, could be the experts, could be the management who actually wants that e-learning produced, and so on. Now, these three things, why is actually the values, right? Shared values, why we do things the way we do them, the common language, and collaborative process, right? So the process that fosters collaboration and makes working with each other easier. These three things are the key things to make a team work, be very well oiled. In terms of values, I was talking to Raivis, and I asked, like, we probably don't really have like values written on the wall, right? Those of you who are in the office, please check around, but I don't think they are. And I was trying to figure out, well, how do you actually define values? To me, that's always like really annoying part of anything, right? When you have to write a vision and mission, and that you feel stupid doing that. So we came up with very simple questions that will uncover the values for you. And the idea is that you sit down with your team, the extended team, and you talk about this and try to answer those questions. And the questions are, what can we compromise on? That's a question that shows your values really, really quickly. So let's say you don't have time or resources or budget to, create something perfect. I guess that's 100% of the time. And you start compromising. So what can we do? Can we make it not as beautiful? Can we make it not that complex, just something simple? Or can we make it, let's say, let's not involve experts. Can we come up with something? Can we replace, a course with a link to Google? So what can we compromise? And people will say, no, we can definitely not compromise on proofreading, for example. Like there will be typos if you don't proofread. We can't, like we have to proofread and so on. And that's a value, and you can talk about whether it is a value or you should let it go. Likewise, so what's inexcusable, right? So you've created a course and you missed a deadline, for example, right? So what is this inexcusable, or something like, no, it has to be perfect, even if it's late, but it has to be great. So we can't, not being great is inexcusable, right? Or maybe better done than perfect, right? So we meet the deadline, we compromise on quality, it's maybe shorter than we planned, not as full, not as engaging, no exercises, just the text, but we met the deadline. Or someone will say, no, this is inexcusable. We can't build boring content that's not engaging. Let's just miss the deadline. So you can talk about things that you can either compromise on, or basically the same question reversed, but it helps people to put into this discussion state. So what's inexcusable? We can't miss deadlines. We can't have typos. There are companies which will say, no, if a course has a typo, I will go and I'll get fired, right? Doesn't matter, if my boss sees a typo, I get fired, something like that. And also, what's a successful project? Again, this is another way to look at the same question, but you can discuss with your team. So what's a successful project? And some people will, and for us in INTEA, that was not an obvious answer at the beginning. At the beginning, we always thought, we talked about and we assumed that a successful project is the one where the customer is happy. And we're like, yeah, we've done it. And, the customer is happy. And we've done another project, and again, it's a success. The customer is happy, they want another project, and so on. And then, a couple of years later, when we were running this business for a few years already, I asked Raivis, why are we so poor? Why can't we afford the TV in the office or something, like a coffee machine that costs 200 euros? Well, that would be great. So, and we started thinking like maybe successful project is the one where you make profits, because it and maybe you don't have to compromise on client happiness. And we started thinking about that and looking at things to improve, because otherwise, when you look for things to improve around, you will say, okay, so what else can we do to make clients happier? Right. And sometimes, let's admit it, our breakfasts are a very open forum. To make a client happy, you just have to invest more of the time beyond the scope, beyond the budget, and they will be happy. That's true, but that will not make a project a success in the way that we define. But okay, this is a vendor perspective. You internally can think in similar ways, like what's a successful project? Well, the expert was happy and didn't quit, and that's a success. But is it a successful project? Probably not. So you can talk about this. You can think about it yourself. You can talk about this with the team, and that will help you arrive at shared values. And having those shared values is important. If you have different answers to those, if you have not discussed, you will unknowingly run into problems project after project after project. So that's probably one takeaway from today.
And I would add that from the internal perspective, if for us as a vendor, of course, we are counting money, we have to be profitable to sustain the business in every project, right? Then when it comes to the internal production, to the learning and development team, that is actually the same. And you not necessarily need to measure your projects in euros. You can measure them in hours, because if you know the amount, kind of the number of the people on your team, you know how many hours a year you have, then you can also calculate and understand which projects took more or less, and also change this perspective talking to your internal customers that we have for this project X amount of hours. That's also part of the budget, right? Not only what we'll pay INTEA or what we will pay anyone else outside. So that would be a very good measurement, because without measuring that, you will think that, as Sergey said, that's a very successful project, but it actually took so much time and effort that kind of we are not happy. We are not ready to invest so many into it, right?
So being constantly overworked is probably number one complaint that we hear from internal teams. Like
absolutely.
I have yet to meet a team that will say, no, we actually, have pretty easy here, and there's like 3 of us, and that's more than enough. All right, so moving on, just to give you an example of INTEA of things that we formulated inside. One of our values is human customers, right? So you can, or hopefully you can feel this, but we never think about our customers as companies. So we don't say, Swedbank is our customer, right? Or Rimi or anyone else. We say that, Elita or Yeva or Yanis are our customer in that sense. And that gives a very different perspective, because when you say that we want to keep our customer happy, are you talking about the company or are you talking about the person? And we always, try to focus on the person that we work with, and this kind of approach to customers as humans is, what we value, right? Sometimes people come from other companies to INTEA, and they have to adapt. Another one is practicality. We are, as you probably know, very down to earth, very no bullshit company. So when we say that, okay, this can be done easier or faster, you don't need this, or why do we even are trying to do that? There's a faster, simpler way. Maybe it's not that fancy or it doesn't cost that much, but we'll always focus on this. So we always try to find, a quicker, simpler way, and to do something, right? So being it again not obvious to everyone, and it's absolutely not the only way to be, so to say, but that is what we are, and we declare this as a value, and then try to convert everyone who joins to this. And also internally, speaking of team, we treat each other as customers. So we have internal clients, so to say, and the people who write scripts, their customer is the design. So the creative department, has people who write scripts and who do the design. So you write a script, not in a way that, okay, I'll give it to them and they can do whatever they want with it. I don't really care how much time they will spend dealing with this and so on. No, you treat them as your customer, and you have to keep them happy. They are human, and you do it in such a way that you get kind of good feedback, good reviews, establish great relationships, and so on. Same thing with design. when design gives something to production, they're not like, okay, I've done my job and I don't care what happens later. No, they actually sit down, they turn the work over to the production, they try to keep them happy, and so on. And you do that in every step of the chain, instead of kind of protecting yourself, trying to protect the other guy and make them happier, and it makes the whole process much smoother. and yeah, not that hard, but we always emphasize that and think about this. So this is just an example of things that we derive from, you know, talking about those questions. Yeah, speaking of, so we try to avoid the situation where it also works the other way, right? So when you treat the other guy as a customer and you have to produce something, and you obviously see that something is wrong, but you really don't care, and you know your job is to copy the text from the document into the LMS, for example, and then you just copy and you don't really care. This is what you get, right? So we try to avoid such things, and you know, this is I don't think this ever happened to us, like the one in the picture. Okay, so the other part is common language. So that's actually really important, and that's especially important for smaller teams who have to interact with outsiders all the time. So if those outsiders kind of repeat themselves, you have to work on the common language with them. You have to have like common definitions of something like, what does, you know, great course look like? So what's great, you know, what's and we achieve this by constantly sharing. You know, look what I found. This look at this TV ad. This looks amazing. Could be useful in e-learning, or maybe we will never be able to do something like that. But this looks amazing. Or here's a course that I've seen. Or this is something that we found and it looks terrible, right? So it's just the other side of the same coin. Like, what does terrible look like? So we always share content with each other, and we look at stuff, and we do showcases of internal projects to have a common understanding of what looks good, what's engaging, what's interesting, what makes clients happy, and so on and so on. So we have a common understanding what is good, and it just comes with time. You kind of tune into the same frequency with time.
At the same time, I would say that you have to professionalize it in a way that if you are about to produce quite many learnings internally, right, then a good idea is, when talking about the common language, is not only about kind of the soft side of it, understanding and creating that vision of what is good and bad, but also codifying your principles. If on the value side, as Sergey was explaining, you define that better, you know, produce it faster, but, you know, with poor quality, maybe not so engaging, then that is one situation. Other situation, you're saying it has to be perfect, right? So depending on that, you have to create a, you know, let's call it a checklist or a guidance. So when you're checking quality, that you're all on the same page, and that all of your production, everything you do, is checked against the same kind of criteria. So it's also kind of some procedural thing as well to have. And sometimes the mistake is that even if it's a team of 2 people, you think like, come on, we kind of know it. As soon as people change, as soon as projects change, that thing starts to, you know, become really kind of uncontrollable, and you get varying quality in what you do.
Yeah, it always happens at the worst possible time, simply because things crack under pressure. And when you have a lot of content to produce fast, for example, this is where you find out that you two are compromising on different things, right? And that leads to a conflict, and conflict leads to a stall, which takes away from your time, and you have to compromise more on the things that are left, and so on. Yeah, so absolutely right. You have to have a common checklist or examples, or a procedure to understand what's good and bad, and to kind of have an understanding. You know, we've compromised on something. It's not as great as we want it to be, but you know, the question is by how much and why exactly, and do we understand why that happened, and that's it. Another part is things like really pertain to language, like grammar, lingo, stuff like that, because well, a simple example, I think we talked about it last time when we talked about branding. So in all of the languages except English, you can have the little u and the big U, right? So in Latvian, tu and use, it's the question is, how do we address our learners? For example, do we say like Mr. Freimanis, please proceed with your e-learning, or do we say hey Raivis, would you like to take a test, or something like that? It's different. And if you have courses that speak different languages, you will be annoyed. Someone brings you a course and you say, well, this is boring, this sounds very formal, this sounds very serious, we don't do that. It's we have to, you know, we are easy people, we want to talk in an easy language and so on. Someone says, no, this is a serious topic. And those conflicts always happen when things like people like lawyers get involved. You know, the legal department reviews your course and you're screwed. Or IT start, you know, we had a case where we had to we had a phrase so that was for a bank about remote banking, and there was a phrase that there are a number of security measures. One of them is that you can restrict access by IP address, and we made the IP address word clickable, which explains, well, the IP address is the unique identifier of your computer on the network. And that's it. And the customer said, okay, can we please, you know, ask our IT if this is a correct definition? And you know, they asked the IT, and IT said, no, of course it's not, and send them like 4-page manual on what IP addresses are. And we had to build this manual into the course, or I don't think we did in the end, but that was a battle suddenly, because it was about grammar. Essentially about the language, about the tone, and that can lead to problems within the same team. You bring someone in and they come from a startup, or they come from a telecom where everyone is like, or they come from marketing where, you know, it's very hip today to talk in a very friendly manner, and you know, suddenly your courses are more serious than that, and your people, for example, the people that you do it for, they don't understand this funny, non-serious approach. They just, you know, don't like those courses because they are not what they are used to, and so on. So there can be conflicts. And Lingo is the same thing. You come to people and say, hey, do you want this course to be slide-based or long read or branching? And everyone's like, what? So you either know that that you have a common understanding and you've trained people and you use the same words for the same things, or you avoid those, or you are aware of those. So this common language is a source, or lack thereof is a source of conflict more times than you can imagine. And finally, this is actually what Raivis was talking about, is guidelines, right? So these things have to be professionalized. These things have to be codified, written down in the form of checklist, guidelines, lists of examples, and it cannot be, you know, on the level of corporate mythology, right? So we sit around, like once a year, we sit around a bonfire. And we talk about it. Very useful, great, but very difficult to onboard people when you do that, and very easy to communicate with others if you have that. So you just, you know, whip it out and you show people, okay, so let me show you the 15 criteria of a great course, and this is what we're going to be building. Like, yes, no, if no, let's talk about it. Very simple. All right, moving on. The final part of why, how, and what is the how thing about the process, right? Ideally, you run this as a conveyor, which works smoothly. Everyone does familiar tasks. Everything fits. Everything is there just in time, and so on. That is a whole topic in itself, right? The process of production, from ideating and you know, creating a brief, to creating concepts, writing scripts, designing, producing, quality assurance, and so on. It's a huge thing, worth of, you know, another talk. But in essence, the smooth process is about a couple of things. First of all, you have to have explicit steps in the process, right? So you have to define your work areas, and you know in which work area you are, and when the work in one area is done and moves over into the next one. I actually never noticed it, but in this picture, you can actually see how the work areas are defined. But that is important. You have to understand that once the design have started on creating illustrations, authors cannot just run to them and say, okay, I have another great idea. Or once the production started, design cannot come to them and say, okay, we just need to fix a few things. Like, can we? So the conveyor always moves in one direction. That is the idea. The course moves from person 1 to person 2 to person 3, or moves through specific steps. Every time that conveyor has to stop and move one step back, that is a huge problem, and you just have to avoid it. It's like if you ever went through an airport with security, that it's kind of hard once you are past the security to just run back and say, okay, I forgot to buy a sandwich. I need a sandwich. Can I just run back real quick? And then I'll be in. I know you've checked me already. You don't need to check me again. Please stop. Where are you moving me? So that's the way the smooth process should work. Second is priorities, right? So again, you can see how those things are connected. What's priority here? Is the priority the absolute great quality? Is the priority the fitting the budget? Is the priority the time that it's done? Is the priority that all the content is included? Is the priority that an expert is happy and approved of everything? Or it's not a priority. The expert has given the info, they looked at it, they have things where they disagree, but we really don't care, right?
And I would suggest here actually one thing we try to use very often is this triangle of project priority triangle or whatever. So you probably have heard and seen that, and so basically you have a triangle with three corners. One is money, another one is deadline, and the third one is scope. And when we work with our customers, or you work with your internal customers, the customers can only define two of them, right? That's the maximum. So if they have fixed budget and deadline, then it has to be your decision about the scope. If the scope is fixed and the budget is fixed, then the deadline depends on how fast you can produce. Otherwise, if they have a say over all three kind of priority corners, that will be a conflict, right? So we usually try to discuss a project from that perspective, and it makes sense to everyone.
Yeah,
we talk about it like that.
It's I think this is really a great addition, and that also allows you to avoid conflict when things change. Someone comes to you and says, okay, this thing needs to be delivered much faster, and you say, okay, well, it will be much smaller then, with the same amount of budget, right? Or you say, okay, I just need to put 2 more people on this, or involve external vendors, and then we can do that, same thing, but twice as fast. But do you approve of this additional budget? It makes kind of a very neutral ground for discussing these things. And discussing things is important. So communication is a huge part of a smooth process, and that's not just how we are all people, we sit down and talk. It's also about, for example, points of contact, right? It's about who's responsible. For example, in INTEA, we do not allow clients to talk to anyone but the one point of contact that they have at INTEA. So as a client, if you call Raivis, he will probably say, okay, great, let's talk, like, this is your project manager, talk to her, or we can all talk about this and so on, but he will not take decisions without her. Likewise, you can't ask to sit down with the designer and discuss stuff, or write directly to them and say, okay, can you please change that? There will always be one person who you go through, because that person oversees the whole process, knows everything, and this is how we build communication.
Moreover, let me step in here. What we kind of very similar to the example with the Formula One. One of the ideas could be add more people, and it will be much faster and better. So sometimes the idea is we have to communicate more, and it will be better and faster and everything. And that is, again, a very dangerous ground, because over communication is also a problem. So one of the ideas we utilize is that very often when you hand over stuff to people, you do not communicate. There is a system in place where I submit the work, I add a comment, the person receives it, and we don't have to have those lengthy discussions, lengthy meetings that eat up a lot of time. So why can it happen? Because if you have agreed on all the rules, if you agreed on the process, on the milestone, on these quality criteria, the amount of communication needed actually decreases. And you might not feel that during the first project, but if you are to produce 20 projects, you have to have a communication plan in place, right? Which is usually the idea is to decrease the number of communication, the amount of communication, rather than increase that.
Yeah, and that's actually a great addition, because I've been in projects where everything is running smoothly. Like, for example, with Branch Track, we are now in a project which has been going on for like 6 weeks. Essentially, we're switching protocols that Branch Track uses to communicate with the client's system. They are switching their system, so we need to adjust the protocol, and it's knock on wood, it's running perfectly smooth, like no hiccups, everything is done super fast, takes very little time and so on. But still, our client, a huge multinational company, schedules weekly meeting of 1 hour where they bring about 12 people from their side, and they demanded at least 2 people from our side to be present and to talk pretty much about nothing, about how everything was done according to the plan and how we are still on schedule and how everything works. But you are there and you're like, okay, what do we have to talk about? We just tested it, it works, and everyone knows that it works, everyone has tested it. Why are we even here? And it's still somehow, with 12 people, you understand, and the chit chat and so on, it still takes like 40 minutes. That is incredibly annoying, and I can feel how with every new meeting those 12 people are just getting annoyed by each other over a project that runs exceptionally smoothly. So you have to be aware that when things are doing well, communication decreases, and that is all right. So you have to adjust. Instead of calling a meeting, just enjoy the time. So yeah, communication. Another example, like getting back to my point of having one point of contact sometimes being beneficial. In other cases, allowing people to talk directly is beneficial as well. So, for example, in our cases, when people have questions, they can go directly to each other. They don't have to involve project managers. So they can talk like this to each other. They don't have to always go like this internally. You always go through one single point of contact when you communicate with external clients, but internally you can just go to anyone and ask, and they will answer, and they will not say, okay, let's schedule a meeting when the project manager is available or something like that. So having an idea of how your communication works, trying to minimize on communication when it's not needed, and being aware that communication eats up a lot of time, and that ideally you have to look to minimize it rather than add more, is like the oil inside a very smooth process. So that's kind of step number 3 for the process. Also, speaking of externalizing, this is just, we will not go into like discussing models today and so on, but this is just an example of a model. It's called successive approximation model, and this is pretty much how we work. There's a prep phase and the iterative design phase where things can change over prototypes, and we work a lot with prototypes, and then it goes into actual development phase where things don't change that much and so on. So there are different ways. Sometimes it doesn't work for all projects and all products. Then there's EDDI, models. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, but having it kind of visualized really helps. So you can sit down with anyone who's new on the team and just walk them through the processes. Don't just assume that, well, everyone knows how a course is built, right? Or we know how a course is built. You know, having it defined is an important part of Six Sigma, and having everything lined out and marked down is very important. Also, speaking of processes, if you ever seen how pictures are loaded on the internet, there are two ways how they can load. One is to load picture from top down, so you have those flowers and they go from, you know, as if you are on a very slow connection, you can see how the picture slowly loads from top to bottom. Or it can, you know, start blurry, but it's a whole picture, and then it becomes less and less blurry, but it's still at all times the whole picture. And that is also a decision that you have to make. We probably are kind of the second type of picture people, where we say, okay, at any point in time, our project is, you know, 100% full, but not 100% complete. But, you know, it's not like let me write the first chapter of the course, and you start designing the first chapter while I write the second chapter, and then I'll write the second chapter and I'll give it to you to design while you give the first chapter to someone to produce. It might seem like a great idea, but in fact we found that it's always better to have like the whole script that is already there. You know, it's not a course, but it's the whole thing, all the content, all the chapters, we have that. Then you give it to design, and they, instead of starting on slide number 1 and spending all the time there until it's perfect, and then moving to slide 2, they go over all slides, make sure that, you know, everything is there. And worst case scenario, if they have to give this course to production today, you know, they can give whatever they have. And it's not one slide out of 100, it's the 100 slides, but they are not perfectly designed to the way that they, you know, need to be designed. Same thing with production. They put everything together, and if they have to give this course today, they will be able to produce this course. This will not be perfect, but it will be the whole course. Because otherwise, it's very easy to have one perfectly executed, designed, and produced slide out of 100, and then the deadline comes and you have nothing, because one slide doesn't cut it. And, you know, you can't compromise on scope typically. So when you talk about process, this is a good metaphor when you explain how you work, and it always allows you to control the time that it takes, because otherwise, you know, you build 90 slides out of 100, and then you find out that the 91st slide is bigger than everything else you've done before, and, you know, you will miss every deadline because of that, and so on. So that's also kind of a philosophical approach to process, and you have to define for yourself how you work. You know, it doesn't have to be like that. This is just, you know, what we have found out works best for us. Also, this is my favorite. Can anyone write in chat what is going on here? Does anyone recognize the situation? Is anyone writing? Let me see. Chat. Split tasks. It's a good guess, but
no, that's an old comment actually.
Old comment, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
But I mean, yeah, you've probably have heard about the competitions like that.
So this sport type is called chess boxing, and the idea is that the guys, they play one round of chess, and then they play fight one round of boxing, and then they go back and play one round of chess, and then they go back and play one round of boxing, and that is until someone wins, whether in boxing or in chess. This is kind of the combination of maximum strength and maximum intellect, and if you look at any pictures from chess boxing, you will very quickly find out that these guys look way more like boxers rather than like chess players. they very quickly found out that it's easier to take a professional boxer and train that person to play chess rather than take a professional chess player and train them not to be knocked out within first second. So that is about task combination, right? So it's about if you have a small team that has to do a lot of things, you have to think in terms like what works. Do you hire a person who is very good at working with people and writing content, for example, and you can train them the design basics real quick? Or do you have to take a person who's very good at design and then train them to write text? Which one is easier? You have to decide for yourself. You will probably end up, doing one thing or another. It's very difficult to find a person who's perfect on both fronts. Also, if you talk about IT people, typically IT skills, development skills, or even writing skills for content writers do not go hand in hand with people skills and the management skills and sales skills, for example. So if ideally I would have, let's say, a designer who can go into a sales meeting and sell their design, but it's hard. So I have to decide whether I want a designer who I can train, a few sales tricks and bring her or him with me in meetings, or I can get a sales guy and explain to him what design is, and then he can sell the designs as well. So you have to decide for yourself. This sport, for obvious reasons, called for one thing. Your situation can call for another thing. And when you talk about perfect people for your team, you have to really understand that a perfect person that does 2, 3, 4 things at once probably doesn't exist, or it's very, very difficult to find. So you have to understand who do we take and what do we train them, right? So what's the basis, what's the additional stuff? Because otherwise you will end up with hiring a chess player, putting them in the ring, and facing the consequences for your project.
Yeah, and I would like to add that sometimes when our customers approach us and say, yeah, we would like to kind of have an addition to our learning team with regards to kind of production of e-learning, administrating the LMS and so on. So sometimes when I look at the kind of list of requirements, then that spans all through 3 different departments in INTEA, and I have to say that, and I must say to them at that point that we don't have people like that, because and it's also a decision. Do you want highly specialized people, or you want a more kind of a generalist approach? So then you also have to understand what you're compromising on, right? Because if it's
if you've been to HR conferences recently, everyone is talking about T-skilled people, T as in the letter T. And the idea is that typically people have a certain area of competence, and it goes deep into that, and they develop that area deeply, so they become more proficient within that area of competence. Right now, everyone's talking about T-shaped people, where you have area of competence that goes deep and is narrow, but also it has the T bars on top of that, so it looks like a letter T like that, where you have your own specialization, but you can move into other things as well as needed, not as deeply, but you are trained on that as well. So that is probably the best approach to this. Finding a person who is everything shaped is impossible, and then you have to decide what specialization is main and what can you add easily, and that can be very different things with very different outcomes, as we've talked. All right, now the final thing is this. Does anyone read Japanese, or does anyone have an idea of what that can be?
crisis, or Jesus crisis. It's two hieroglyphs. So yeah.
Yeah. By the way, getting back to chat, Simona wrote that it's all about strategy in boxing and topics. And that is absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I play tennis, for example, and I'm amazed at how uh, how much like chess tennis is. It's about stamina and skill and so on, but it's about like you think all the time. You come out of there and you thought like, okay, I'm gonna do some physical exercise and turns out that you think for 1 hour all the time. Yeah, same thing chess, same thing boxing. It's all about strategy, and that's probably when actually that's actually before we get to the hieroglyphics, when Raivis hires people in INTEA, and I don't hire people in INTEA. It's Raivis's decision 100% all the time. It's about we look for the kind of person who can adapt to things and who has this self-reliant strategic thinking and could be a great at anything. Their life has put them into a position when they are great at something, but they have the potential to be great at pretty much anything. So this kind of person will look, and that does not always come with very relevant experience, for example, but we don't really care at this point. We just think that hey, it's we can't expect people with a lot of e-learning skills or e-learning experience, and it's a small market. So we say, okay, you are just a great person. You're strategically thinking, adapt. You know how to adapt and learn stuff. We'll take you. So yeah, it's that's probably the common denominator to everything. Yeah. So this thing is actually Kaizen. It's about continuous improvement, and it's the epitome of things being in their place at all time and everything being in order. The continuous improvement process or cycle is also something that helps keep your team great. And it's on one hand, it's very kind of obvious, and when you think about it, right? So what you essentially do, you identify things to fix, and then you try to fix them, and then you see if it worked, and then you try to identify new things. But this thing has to be codified, right? If you have a team, if you have a process that you're not always happy with, and hopefully you're not always happy with it at all times, you go to those things, and like in INTEA, we have every 3 months, the internal project day, where we go through those things regularly, and everyone knows once it becomes a habit, everyone knows that they have to kind of be prepared for that, and that there will be an opportunity to speak up, and those things will actually happen, and so on. So once you start doing this professionally in an organized manner, that helps to improve things tremendously. So if you kind of think that you're improving things by talking about how everything is bad and how great it would be to change that, but that is not a formal process for you, chances are things are not really changing, right? And it's very easy to kind of fool yourself into thinking that, yes, we are thinking about improvement all the time. But unless this is a process that's organized and has times and budgets and tasks and strategies, then it will not work. So that is also kind of an important pillar of what we do. So yeah, that kind of in a kind of circular way brings us back to the beginning, where you have to focus on the why, how, and what of things, and look at them all the time. I hope that was useful. Let us know, was that useful, given that small teams and not everyone shared how much people you have and so on. But let us know if that's useful. Thank you so much for coming today. We are always happy to see you. Subscribe to INTEA on every network that you prefer. This recording, we're recording the thing, will be available on our YouTube channel. Hopefully we'll send it to you on Monday, so you can share it with your colleagues. This is not top secret, feel free. And if you have ideas for what you would like to discuss next time, if you have suggestions of the topics that you feel we could help you with, please let us know either right now, just, it came up to your head right now, just write in chat, or get in touch with us later. Our doors, so to say, are always open. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.